everybody.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Brandeis from the Federation. I just want to let everyone know that we do record these sessions, so I'm not sure what that means. Make your remarks appropriate or something like that.
To change everything. I'm tearing up my notes.
And without further ado, let me introduce Rabbi Rosenfeld for the last session of the evening.
Thank you, Dan. My name is Henoch Rosenfeld, and welcome everybody to those of you who have joined us through the home stretch, the 12 a.m. stretch. And I think together with my wife and I, my wife, Sarah, some of you I've met, some of you I see some of your names on there hiding behind the screens. We co-direct Chabad Young Professionals of Pittsburgh, and we are a vibrant community of young professionals who get together for all types of different social and fun events. And I was very excited at the opportunity to share some Torah wisdom tonight. And we're going to be exploring a very interesting topic. And I hope that you'll indulge with me. And hopefully we'll learn something new. And if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. If you want to disagree or you want to push back. The last class that I gave with Rabbi Schiff, Dan, you may appreciate this, especially you know Rabbi Schiff well. Last class that I gave, Rabbi Schiff was on. And he didn't warn me that he's going to be asking questions throughout. And oh, that was something. That was fun. It was fun. It was good. Put it this way, I told Rabbi Schiff at the end that it prepared me for any class I would give. So here we are. Hopefully we'll learn something together. Hopefully we'll discover something about our topic tonight, which I believe was Kabbalah and self-help. And what we're going to do tonight is really do a deep dive into who you are. What am I? What is the essence of self from a Kabbalistic and a Hasidic perspective, really, but we'll take this from a tangible start. And we're going to try to break it down into very practical Jewish law and see how Jewish law really looks at the Jewish person. But I want to give one caveat, because this came up in other classes that I addressed this topic as well. That as a rabbi, one of the things that I study is Jewish souls and the Jewish person, who the Jew is. And often questions that I get is, does this apply to a non-Jewish soul? And it's a good question. And I don't always have the answers to it, because the sources that I use and the books of Hasidic philosophy that I read and study are addressing particularly the Jewish soul. And of course, like the DNA of any entity, the soul, especially a spiritual thing, being that Judaism is so spiritual, the soul is spiritual, anything godly is spiritual. Obviously there will be differences, but I don't have all the answers about I don't have all the answers about the Jewish soul, let alone the non-Jewish soul, which of course is a holy creature, or holy creation, I should say, rather, in and of its own, just like the Jewish soul. But what we're going to talk about today is primarily, it not necessarily does it exclude the non-Jewish soul, but someone in the previous class, someone asked, does that also apply to non-Jewish? It's possible the answer is yes. I just don't always know the answer to that, because most of the sources that I'm going to be quoting tonight predominantly speak about the Jewish, who am I? So I just wanted to put that up there. So I think then you said you made me the co-host, and I'm going to share my screen over here, where we're going to go back to kindergarten and learn one of our favorite poems from one of our favorite poets. Here we go. I think I can do this. I think you all see my screen over there already. So the title of our class is going to be Who Am I? The Essence of Self. And the first poem we'll read, if anyone wants to volunteer and read, I don't want to call on anyone, especially those of you who are hiding behind the cameras. I don't want to call on you. But if your camera is not on and you want to volunteer, please feel free to let me know. But for those of you who, maybe to make this simpler, I'll just read. And if I have any volunteers, please just chat in my box. I'd be happy to hand it off to somebody else to get somebody else's voice up and on this. And probably by the end, you guys will be begging me to stop talking. So here we go. This is a poem from the late American poet Shel Silverstein. Those of you who are familiar with children's books of the 60s and the 70s, you probably know her very well. And a famous poem that she wrote, which I believe encapsulates a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. I asked the zebra, are you black with white stripes, or are you black with white, or sorry, are you black with white stripes, or are you white with black stripes? And the zebra asked me, are you good with bad habits, or are you bad with good habits? Are you noisy with quiet times, or are you quiet with noisy times? Are you happy with some sad days? Or are you sad with some happy days? Are you neat with some sloppy ways, or are you sloppy with some neat ways? And on went the zebra, and I'll never ask the zebra about stripes again. Fascinating poem where, and I'm sure a lot of you have this experience as well, but often when I go back to my children's books, as I'm reading them to my children today, I often pause and think, wow, that was really deep. And when I read it as a kid, I had no idea what they meant, but here we are. Fascinating poem, which I believe can segue us in right into our question for tonight, is who are we? Which identity do we have? So often we feel like we're somewhat double identity. Sometimes we're acting nice, sometimes we're acting not nice. Sometimes we're in good moods, sometimes we're in bad moods. Sometimes we feel like doing kindness to others, sometimes we feel like slapping the other in the face. And we can have this multiple times a day. We can have the same feelings towards somebody else within the same interaction that you have with them at the same time. And on a superficial level or on a very basic level, you don't really think deeply into it because these are our actions. These are the way we express ourselves to others, the way we act towards others. But if you pause and want to understand the question of who you are, you have to think about, 1 second, which one was the real me? Well, the real McCoy. Who is the real McCoy? Can you please let us know, who are you? Am I the nice guy or am I the mean guy? Which mood is really me and which mood is the expression of something external, which is now affecting my behavior? And that, I believe, is what this poem is really asking us. And I think that's a question that we really have to push towards ourselves. I see something's coming up in the chat over here. Sorry, my chat was off. Hang on 1 second. I see Mrs. Katz says that Shel Silverstein was the man. Yeah, absolutely. And we have quite a few ways that we could address this question. But I think this pushes us to the actual very basic fundamental question that philosophers have been grappling with from the 1600s and even earlier, which really is, what is the moral nature of mankind? Are we inherently good or are we inherently evil? Everybody at some point in their studies, whether they studied philosophy for a living like I do, or whether they just happen to come across and reading some books in some place somewhere, some waiting room somewhere, everybody has heard that question. What is man? Is man inherently good or is man inherently evil? Are we good people that do evil things sometimes? Or are we evil people that sometimes stumble upon something good and we act in a good way? Which one is our essence? Which one is us? So to borrow a little bit from philosophy before we get into Hasidus and Kabbalah, I'll quote you from Dr. Freud, who obviously I'm sure you're well aware is one of the fathers of psychology today, or psychoanalysis from the 1800s, early 1900s. And what he said is as follows. He took the following approach. He said, I found little that is good about human beings on the whole world. In my experience, most of them are trash, no matter what they publicly subscribe to, this or that ethical doctrine or none at all. So Sigmund Freud clearly took the position that humanity is trash. And he actually wasn't just talking about Jews. We know a lot of people think Jews are trash, right? But to think that all humanity is trash, that was an extreme that Sigmund Freud took. And he clearly believed that any goodness which came from man was the result of an external factor. And it wasn't something which man was inherently born with, a goodness or something that he had within him. Rather, man, as a result of societal pressure, could have been pressured into doing something positive. But when he was born, man has no inherent goodness to him. The basis, not to get into a lengthy philosophical conversation about Freud's approach in this, but the basis for his approach was, just to give it in a nutshell, was that he believed that the drive for man to live and anything that man does, his whole drive was based on a man's desire to have pleasure. So everything in life that a man does, he does it to desire to have pleasure. If a man sits in a restaurant like a mensch and doesn't push in front of the line and doesn't grab somebody else's food, it's all because a man inherently knows in order for him to have more pleasure in life, to enjoy what he's eating in the restaurant, he has to sit appropriately and behave normally. And societal norms eventually push it upon him that he starts understanding that if we want to have a pleasurable life, we all have to act like normal human beings and we have to be nice to each other, and we'll all gain eventually from it. So whether we think about this consciously or subconsciously, his approach was that that is the driving force of man. Now, what Freud did agree to is that there's something which he referred to as the super ego. Okay, I like how he called it ego, because he agrees that there is morals to man. Man does have morals and man does have ethics, but he believes that they're all man-made. They're all societal inventions. We aren't moral because we were born moral, says Freud. We are moral because society has pushed us in a moral direction. Society believes that maybe even a religious reason, it may be a cultural reason that we now feel that stealing is inappropriate. And those cultural norms have been passed down from parent to parent. But again, it wasn't something that if a child would have been born in on an island somewhere in the middle of nowhere without any upbringing and somehow raised himself, he would have no sense of morals whatsoever. He believed that all morals are man-made, so to speak, and come from somebody else. So I think his approach is the extreme. But pull it back to our conversation. What does Judaism have to say about this? What does Judaism believe in? Does Judaism actually believe that, as Freud believed, that man is inherently bad? Or does Judaism push you and say man is inherently good? And I believe that if you would agree with Freud that man is inherently bad, I think you would have to take the position that true altruism, doing something for no reason at all, doesn't really exist in the world. Because if everything is pushed by self-gratification, then true altruism and doing it just because it's the right thing to do doesn't really exist in the world, period. Because ultimately, if you go along Freud's philosophy, everything is going to end off with, and it makes me feel good. No, I don't steal because society pushes me in that direction, because I know that's the right thing to do, and I want to make somebody, whatever. It's always going to end off with, and it makes me feel good, and that is the reason for goodness. As I'm saying this, I recall a conversation that I once had with members of other faith-based groups, and they were talking about the drive to be good among other different religions and what their perspective is. And one of them mentioned that the drive to do good is based on a belief that there's punishment, there's reward, and when a person does more good than bad, they go to heaven. When they do more bad than good, they go to hell, and so on and so forth. Another one said, really, it's not really about that. It's because if you're good, then society is able to if you're selfless and you're able to be a selfless person, then society at large benefits from lots of selfless people living together. If we're all egotistic and we don't look out for ourselves, then society will crumble. And as I'm listening to this conversation, I didn't say this out loud, but I'm thinking as Judaism would look at this, I'm thinking they're all talking about, from a very Freudian perspective, that you're looking for a very selfish reason to live a selfless life. That if you live a selfless life, then everybody will gain, including yourself. So that's, in essence, a selfish reason to live if you are selfless, you will get more reward than punishment. So that's, again, another selfish reason. Of course, it's maybe more refined type of selfishness. It's not a coarse selfishness that I want to be rich. It's a refined selfishness. I just want to have heaven, not hell. But it's nonetheless selfishness. So on the flip side, if you want to take the other perspective that maybe Judaism or maybe mankind is inherently good, I think the question we're going to have to pose to ourselves is, how does genocide exist in the world? How does evil exist in the world? How does mankind cause so much destruction? If man is inherently good, if we would take the opposite of the Freud perspective, that man is inherently good, and man is always pushing to do good, and his inherent existence is goodness, morals, ethics. All right, I get it, you can slip up. But the fact that there's so much evil and destruction that man has caused in this world is something which is very hard to believe if you take that position. But you can look at it from any perspective, and I think either perspective has merit and has discussion and has debate. But let's take a deep dive into Tanya. And of course, once again, my chat is open over there. So if any of you wants to push back on either my Ford perspective or Judaism, or if you have any take on which one you think it is inherently good or inherently evil, feel free to chime in. So let's take a deep dive into the first and second chapter of Tanya. Tanya, if you're not familiar yet with that book, it's a book I strongly recommend anyone who's interested in Jewish philosophy or the way Hasidus looks at the Jewish soul and looks at the way our drive and our mission in life is, to pick up an English Tanya and really get into it and really delve into it. It's a fascinating book, which was written by the first Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement. He passed away in the year 1812, from 1745 to 1812, Rabbi Shneir Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Tanya, also known as the Alter Rebbe. He was the one who transcribed this book, which really became the focal point of all discussions around souls and what our mission here in this world as Jewish people is to do, how we should live our lives in the constant struggle to get better and to refine ourselves. And here's what he had to say, and here's what he wrote about the Jewish soul based on his readings in different texts throughout Kabbalah. And he said as follows, and I'll read it in English: every Jew, irrespective of his or her spiritual standing, possesses not one, but two souls. One of these souls, the mundane and unholy one, is the source of all self-oriented human traits. The second soul of the Jew is a part of the second soul of the Jew is a part of God, literally. Two souls, One is the animalistic nature, which possesses all of the mundane and unholy things. You have a second soul, which is all godly and possesses only holy things. So the Alter Rebbe tells us over here, the author of the Tanya tells us over here, that really we have two levels of consciousness within us, two different parts of us. There's the unholy part and the holy part. The first soul is the life force of the physical body and its drive for self-preservation. I would even say the first soul is very similar to Freud's definition of the way the human person is. And if we would stop with just the first soul, I think even Judaism would agree with Freud that man is inherently not evil, but egotistic. Man inherently just wants pleasure. The first soul is that drive to live. It's the drive to survive. It's the drive to take care of yourself. It's the drive to make sure you have what you need. And it's the source of most worldly pleasures as well. It's the things that you need and you want to have and you have to exist. It's the more physical oriented soul, which really has things that want to attach itself to what you need to do. The second soul, says the Alter Rebbe, is called the godly soul. That soul has an exact opposite nature. It's a much more refined soul, which is literally a piece of God. Now, if you're a piece of God, literally a piece of God, what would your pleasures be? What would your wants and desires? What's your nature? Where are you being pushed towards? If you're a piece of God, you're being pushed towards godliness. You're being pushed towards spirituality, godly ethics, godly morals. You're doing what God wants, which is goodness. God is the ultimate of goodness. God is the only thing which can only be completely good from the beginning to its end. So you have these two conflicting consciousnesses in Judaism. You have the animalistic soul, we'll call it, the soul which is driven just to survive, instinctively do things that are good for me, do things which help me exist, do things which make sure that I can have what I need. And then you have pause. So if we stop with the animalistic soul, if we just say we have only this part of our conscious, and in a sense, if we take Freud's perspective, what is the human? The human is really just a more sophisticated animal. We also have a brain and we can think and we can do analytical thinking and we can create and we can be creative and so on. But if we stop right there, us and animals are very similar. We're just, a more sophisticated one. We're a step above them. But Judaism says, no. There's a whole nother level of consciousness that we have that animals don't have and other creatures don't have. You have something which is called the godly soul. The godly consciousness which is within us, which has all godly natures that push us towards that direction, the godly direction. And if you have a piece of God within you, obviously the desires of the second soul, this one, the godly soul, revolve around God and his will. So let's talk about some of the things that we have practically. This animalistic soul, the self-oriented soul, number one. Ego, self-importance, I need to be me, desire, self-gratification, worldly pleasures all come from this first soul, the animalistic soul. And you have the godly soul. Selflessness, altruism, that can exist. The godly soul, it doesn't even think about me. Who am I? I'm just a piece of God. There's nothing to me. I am not anything. I'm a piece of God. I have a God. That's what the godly soul is. Why do I do this? Why do I do a mitzvah today? Because God wants me to do a mitzvah today. I'll get rewarded, I'll get punished. All right, those are details. I don't know. But I do a mitzvah today because I'm a piece of God and I'm connected to God. I want to be attached to God, inclined towards spiritual pleasures. That's all going to be the godly soul, which pushes us in a different direction. And I think even if these are new concepts to you today, I think everybody can at least relate to this idea of this struggle which goes on inside of you. And the Alter Rebbe in a further chapter in Tanya kind of compares this to a tale of two kings fighting over a city. And each king refuses to have control on a 50% basis. They don't want a united government. They want complete control. They want their own coalition to be completely in power. They don't mind that the other one exists, but they don't want the other king to have any control in that city. Says the Alter Rebbe that our bodies, our existence is that city, and the two souls are the two kings fighting over control. You have the animalistic soul who's fighting within us, who's pushing forth all of our egotistic pleasures, pushing forth our self-desires and everything that comes from that side. Then you have The godly soul who's saying, no, spirituality, closer to God, do the things that you're supposed to. And from that comes morals, ethics, which we have inherently. Not something that society gave us, inherently within us, because we literally have a piece of God within us. Where do those ethics come from? They come from God. Where does our nature not to do evil come from? They come from our godly soul. What do you mean? Where does it come from? God can't do evil. We won't do evil because we have a piece of God. Where does our essence to do good come from? It comes from everything that God pushes down within us and everything that we have within God, everything that we have within us. So we have this battle, this reflection of this little war between these two kings going back and forth. And that comprises a very conflicted man. You have these two energies inside of you, which are really, really fighting. Which begs the question, though, which one are we? The question that we asked in the very beginning, which was, okay, who are we? We still haven't answered that question. We basically said we're both. We're good and we're evil. Okay, but which one is the real us? So I think at this point, we would say that Judaism strays a little bit or a lot of it from Freud and says, no. We also have inherent goodness within us. It's called a piece of God. But we haven't yet told us, all right, but we have a piece of God within us. We also have this animalistic soul, which has this nature for self-preservation and self-gratification. Which one is it? Which one is me? Who am I as a person? Am I the godly soul? Am I the one is that the real me? And sometimes I stumble and end up listening to my animalistic soul and do the natures that he wants me. Or am I the other way around? Am I really the animalistic soul? And sometimes my godly nature overcomes me and allows me to do goodness, and my goodness shines through. So either way, it's going to come, we have it within us. The question is, which one is the real me? Which one really identifies it? So I'll venture to show you from a real Talmudic, I think it's a very fascinating Jewish law, which you'll find fascinating, which we'll get to in a second, how it shows what Judaism's take on this is. But first, I'll tell you what the take is. And that is that Judaism believes our primary identity, who we are, is our divine soul, which is literally a part of God. Although it may seem that that's not commonly, who do we interact with? Self-preservation, gratification. We want to exist, we want to live, we want to be primarily, most of the time during the day, look, let's face it, we may not be doing bad things, but most of the day we're serving ourselves. Most of the day we're taking care of ourselves. But nonetheless, the innermost and the truest part of our identity is the consciousness, the godly consciousness that God gave to us. And where do we see this? We'll get to the case study in a second, but where do we see this, says the Alter Rebbe. He says, the fact that you can have a Jew, a Jewish person, regardless of his level of religiosity, regardless of how much he's connected to the religion of Judaism, but is just a person with a Jewish soul, has this godly soul within him, has the capacity to give up his life for Judaism. That shows you that his godly soul is the primary faction running within him. What do I mean? When does our best come out? When a person is pushed up against the wall, that's when his best comes out. When a person is under pressure is a bad example because some people don't function when under pressure. When a person really needs to show up, that's when he has to put on his A game. When a person really is pushed up against the wall, that's when his essence, his inner courages come back. They have stories that are told about in the Holocaust when people are running and hiding and they squeezed into small places. And then when the danger passed, they weren't able to get out of those places anymore. What happened? When they were getting in, when they were in a danger and they were in such pressure, there was an adrenaline that their innermost energies came out and they had the energy somehow to squeeze into a small place. Now that the danger passed, they were no longer threatened by their life. They couldn't get out of that space anymore because they didn't have that same energy within them. A Jew, the godly soul, ultimately always wants to be connected to God, wants to do what God wants. What happens? The godly soul is in this conflict. So he's buried beneath this animalistic soul and he's kind of like overshadowed, overpowered by all the worldly measures. Look, we live in a non-godly world. So the godly soul kind of starts on the back end. He starts already a couple points below the animal soul. The animal soul says, hey, we're living in an animalistic world, a self-gratifying world. We're living in a world where animalistic nature rules, self-gratifying nature rules. So the godly soul already starts a couple steps below. So when do we see? So the godly soul is constantly trying to express itself and show who he is, and we're constantly kind of covering it over. What happens though? if a Jew, God forbid, is in a situation where he is told, denounce your Judaism or give up your life. Cut yourself off from Judaism, convert to another religion. When you go through history, there are countless cases, and I believe if you would do a study in history, a large majority of such cases, the Jew is ready to give up his life and to denounce his Judaism. Why is that the case? Where does that come from? You can be a Jew who's not religious at all. A Jew has no connection on a daily basis to God, at least he thinks so. Why? Because when a Jew is put up against the wall and his essence is threatened, something very strong comes forth. What is that essence? It's the godly soul, which sparks up and says, you will not take God away from me. You will not say that I'm separate from God. There's no way you can do that. And then the Jew says, okay, I'm ready to give up my life. And what is my life if not God? That's a sign that the essence really is the godly soul. That's who we are. Because if the essence was self-gratification, the Jew would say, as long as I'm alive, who cares? So I'm not Jewish, God forbid. So I'm not, all right. But the godly soul, if you're not Jewish, who are you? What are you? That's who you are. That's your essence. And that's your connection to God. And that's what you are. So I want to show this very fascinating Jewish law, which I think anyone who, with any familiarity with secular law, will be fascinated by this. Where are we over here? Jewish law in capital punishment has a love-hate relationship. On the one hand, capital punishment does exist in Jewish law. But on the other hand, it's nearly impossible to ever actually come out with such a verdict. So it exists, but the measure by which a person must be pronounced guilty in order to actually follow through with a capital punishment is extremely high and therefore is extremely rare. And therefore it even says about a bet din, the Jewish court, that ever put somebody to death during the tenure of 10 years or 12 years, I don't remember the exact amount it was, is considered a deadly court. Stay away from them. So capital punishment exists, but at the same time, Judaism really, really puts the bar extremely high in order to make it a reality in any situation. So here's a fascinating little known law in Judaism. The Sanhedrin was known as the High Court, 71 judges. It was like the Jewish Supreme Court. And if they have sitting in front of them a defendant who is accused of a crime that is deserving of capital punishment, I don't know, treason, if you may, and all 71 of the judges pronounce him guilty, the man is set free. The law is written right there. It's coming straight from the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. If the panel known as the Sanhedrin unanimously agrees that the defendant is guilty in a capital case, the man is acquitted. Seemingly, that's the exact opposite of what you would think. Now, if one judge out of the 70 says innocent and 70 say guilty, the man is pronounced guilty and he's put to death. Fascinating law, which doesn't really make sense. It defies logic on a very basic level unless you dig beneath the surface. Because secular law, I believe in all 50 states, but correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's a handful of states which have different laws, require in any criminal case there to be a unanimous jury. There could be a few exceptions I didn't check before, but I believe at least in the majority of definitely federal crimes, but I believe even state crimes, in order to be pronounced, and some states I believe even have this for civil law, not just criminal law. In order to be pronounced guilty, you need to have, and that makes the most sense. If you're giving the severest punishment, pronounce them guilty, you got to make sure everybody's on board and you're not just, kind of like wobbling through this and going through this in a way that, oh yeah, it kind of looks like he deserved. No, get everybody on board. But Jewish law says no. Jewish law says that every single judge says you're guilty, the guy walks away innocent. You got to have one holdout. So what exactly is the reasoning behind this? And what exactly can go, how can we understand this? But based on our understanding, that the inherent essence of every single Jew is goodness, is a godly soul. And every Jew has a godly side to him that isn't just a recessive gene. He has a godly side to him, which is his predominant essence. Excuse me. He has a godly side to him, which shines forth and actually is who he is. Says Jewish law, if not a single judge was able to see past the badness that he did and found some virtue and some reason to acquit him, the jury was cooked. Something's wrong here. You guys didn't do your deliberations properly. If no one was able to see beneath it, you're right. If he was bad and it was a bad thing that he did, so yeah, most of the judges are probably going to pronounce him guilty and they'll be guilty. But if there was not even one holdout, not even one person was able to see past all the badness that he has, to get to the depths, to get to the core, to get to his godly soul and say, this man is inherently good, don't kill him. There wasn't one holdout. Says Jewish law, the books are cooked, or I should say the jury has been tampered with. Somebody didn't do the deliberations well. Get back into the room and deliberate a little bit more. Now, it's important to note that there are caveats to this law. And some, according to many halachic authorities, this law only applies if they came back with a verdict on the first day of deliberations. So it really shows they really rushed it. But if they actually processed the whole thing and they went through weeks of deliberations and they still came back unanimously, then this law wouldn't apply. But the principle remains the same. A rushed verdict and not one holdout, that means that you guys are missing something fundamental. You're missing the godly soul that really exists. And I think that's a very, very powerful way of looking at things. And which begs the question, really, where do we see this godly soul in our daily lives? How do we relate to this and how do we connect to this godly soul? And I think everyone can relate to this in a different way, but the manifestation of the godly soul is not to say that it can't come out in different ways which look very material. What do I mean by that? The godly soul recognizes what the divine will is. The fact of the matter is we live here in a very physical world, and we live in a physical world because God wanted us to take this physical world and use it for his name. He wanted us to take this physical world and make it holy, make the mundane into holiness. Take something physical and have a nice Shabbos meal around the table and take all the food and all the good stuff that we bought, enjoy it, but enjoy it in the context of a good Shabbos meal or a holiday setting. Have a conversation with some friends and so on. Do something holy. Take leather, wrap tefillin without leather. Take money and give charity with that money, or buy nice things for yourself so you can have pleasure, so you can go out and share that pleasure with others. That is the purpose of our existence here in this world. God didn't want perfect, but God put us in this imperfect world to make it more perfect. God values the process. As a matter of fact, there's a story told about one of the great Hasidic Rebbes who he wrote down who this Rebbe was. It was a Rebbe where an individual came to him and said, tell me, Rebbe, please, if God wanted this world to be perfect, why did he create so many temptations in this world? And why did he put so many obstacles in front of perfection within this world? If he wanted it to be perfect, why not create it perfect on the onset? So the Rebbe asked him, you asked me a question, can I ask you a question? What's the question? Do you have any hobbies? Sure, I collect paintings. Says the Rebbe, okay, what's your nicest painting you have? So he said a painting of a specific painter. It's a beautiful painting, I should say, of a family sitting on a beach under an umbrella, and there's a plane flying by in the sky. It's worth thousands of dollars, this painting. Says the Rebbe, let me ask you something. If I set up that scene on the beach and snapped a photo of it and blew it up in large and handed it to you, how much would you pay me for that photo? I don't know. If it's a nice photo, I'll pay you $10. So the Rebbe says, tell me something. This painting, why is this painting so much more expensive? I'm giving you the photo, which is the exact image of the way it played out and the way it was. This man said, you're not understanding. The beauty of the painting is the imperfection. The beauty of the painting is the artist's heart and soul is into it, and you can feel him, you feel the energy and everything that he wrote. And us real collectors, we understand the beauty inside of it. So I said, oh, you're getting it. God is like a collector. He understands the beauty is not in the perfection. The beauty is in the painting and the journey that we go through to get to the best perfection that we can get to. But we don't value the end result as much as we value the journey to get to that perfection. So getting back to the manifestation of the godly soul in our daily lives, the godly soul recognizes that in order for us to serve God, we need worldly pleasures. So our worldly desire to sit down and have a cup of tea, late at night at 12:30 a.m. may be very much a push by the godly soul to say, hey, if you have a cup of tea, you'll be more alert and awake to study Torah at night. It may be a manifestation of the godly soul pushing us in the direction saying, I know how to get you going. I know how to get you to be more charitable today. I'm going to tell you to go treat yourself out to, a spa day today. Go have a day, then you'll be more charitable. So even the physical pleasures that we have in this world can be driven in a very discreet way by our godly nature to really do good, to really make sure that we have everything inherently good. And I think that that's very, very important in the way that we value ourselves, that a person cannot, if a person, self-reflection and how we look at ourselves is very important. And sometimes we can't really see the depths of the godly soul. And I'll share another story of another great Hasidic Rebbe who was approached by one Hasid who told him, Rebbe, I don't understand this. There are so many important Jews that exist in the world, yet you spend so much time every single day dealing with, talking with, studying with simple peasants, Jews that come off the street and want to discuss with you. And anyone who's familiar with any history of some Hasidic Rebbes, especially the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he spent his time throughout the days and hours, he spent his time dealing with mundane matters of simple folk, simple people that weren't very high prestige. So this Chassid asked this Rebbe, tell me, please, why is it that you spend so much time with just the mundane? Deal with the more spiritual people, deal with the people that really, really, really have something to give. The Rebbe responded to him, tell me, what do you do for a living? And the Rebbe knew that this person for a living was a diamond merchant. And he said to the Rebbe, I sell diamonds. Do you have any diamonds on you? As a matter of fact, I'm just coming from the diamond district and I have a whole bag of diamonds here. So he said, can I see some of the diamonds? He poured out diamonds and they were coarse, very unrefined diamonds, clearly haven't been cleaned yet and really chopped and really made into the way that. So the Rebbe looks at all the diamonds, picks up one of the diamonds and says, this is the biggest diamond here. I would assume that this is, probably was the cleanest. Also, the Rebbe said, this is probably the nicest diamond, most expensive one. The guy said, no, absolutely, you're wrong on that one, Rebbe. This one over here, you see it's covered in mud and all this stuff that's all around it. This is actually the most expensive one. I don't understand it. This is the cleanest one right here. Why that dirty one? He says, you're right. Once I clean it, I'll come back and I'll show you how it's much better. But it's very, very hard. It's impossible for somebody who's not an expert to truly value and understand the beauty of a diamond unless you're an expert. Says the Rebbe, that's right. And that's true about the Jewish soul as well. Unless you're an expert, you can't really value the godly soul. And therefore, when you see a Jew or you see an individual, what do you see? You see, I don't know, you see another person. You see external factors. You see how much money he has in his wallet. You see what his status is. Said the Rebbe to this person, but I'm an expert in souls. And I'm able to see that every single individual has this godly soul, which is inherently good. And I don't care if this is a great pious person or a great smart individual, or this is a simple person, a farmer, I don't know, somebody who just, working a $10 an hour job. He has a godly soul. And I can see to the essence. And to me, it's the same value. It's the same diamond which is beneath there. Which leads us to our final thought that I want to segue into, which that is the idea of the mitzvah that we all have. The ahavta l're'acha kamocha, which is a very, very fundamental mitzvah in the Torah, to love your fellow as you love yourself. And based on our new understanding of the souls and what a person is and what our essence is, predominantly good with a godly drive, which really is the core of the Jewish soul, a piece of God within him, the core of the Jewish person. We can answer something which you may have thought about before, but I always found baffling, and perhaps I'll put it forth in a way that may make it surprising to you as well. Torah tells us that we have to love our fellow like we love ourselves. Now, everyone knows that Torah doesn't mince words and doesn't say things if it didn't mean it. Can we really love someone the same way we love ourselves? I mean, I can love them almost as much as I love myself. Can I really love somebody just like I love myself? The Torah can say, love your fellow a lot. Love your fellow super much, super much. Love your fellow as much as you love your best friend. Treat your fellow but to love your fellow like you love yourself seems like a high bar to set. Yet the Torah tells us to do it. Love your fellow like you love yourself. What's the explanation behind it? So some want to say, yeah, it doesn't really mean it. It means kind of like yourself. Says the Hasidic commentaries, and says the Alter Rebbe in chapter 32 of Tanya. He says, if you understand that the essence of your existence is your godly soul, so what are you? You're a chunk of God. That's all you are. All you are. That is who you are. Wow. You're a chunk of God. But you're not just you that's a chunk of God. Your friend is also a chunk of God. You guys are both this amazing, powerful existence of godliness here in this world, which has tremendous potential to do tremendous goodness in this world. Yeah, there's all these types of stuff covered over you, but that's not who your essence is. That's not who you really are. That was our external factors. It's the animalistic soul, which is trying to cover over your essence, not allow you to express yourself. But if your godly soul is really who you are, then I can love my fellow because that is who I am. My fellow is me. We have the same existence. We are the same. We are each other. We're both a chunk of one piece of godliness. And we're both a chunk of the godliness which really exists down here in this world. And we really, really can relate to it on that perspective that we no longer have to look at someone else as something external. If our animalistic drive, the Freud drive, the id, the one who always wants self-pleasure, is the predominant force within us, so then there's no way possible that I can have self-pleasure by having the same love I have for myself as I would have for my neighbor. That's not self-pleasure. But it's not the predominant force. The predominant force is really the person who has the godly nature within him. Then he can realize that I can also have this tremendous nature within him as well. So to sum it up, says sum it up, it's extremely important to value yourself in order to value others as well. Some may say that in order to value others, you have to put yourself down a little bit. I'm not that important. Who am I? All right, I can make space for others. We all know that in order to get people that are very haughty, people that come out in the world and always need to show off. Dr. Abram J. Torsky, Dr. Torsky, our own Pittsburgh Dr. Torsky, who passed away this year, who was a very close friend of our family and a very close friend of many in Pittsburgh. He once wrote a fascinating piece on a person's desires. And what he said is as follows. He said, little children climb on a chair or a table to announce, see how big I am. I can almost touch the ceiling. They show their greatness by climbing on a table. He says, adults do the same thing. We just do it in different ways. Some people are name droppers. They try to impress other people by telling them how important they are, by showing them how much money they have. He wrote as follows, we have a huge inflated ego that a person has. Actually, the person feels terribly depleted and acts in desperation to convince others of his or her importance. When a person with an ego walks into the room showing off his importance, what he's basically saying is, I have no self-worth, and therefore I need to turn to you to make me feel important. Says Hasidic philosophy and Hasidic thought. I'm sorry, Deb, I see you had a comment there. I'll get to in just a second. Oh, that was a while back. I'm sorry, I missed it. Says Hasidic philosophy. Says Hasidic philosophy that in order to understand, in order to really value another person, we have to first value ourselves, understand who you are. Don't look for others. No, you should look at yourself as greatness. Look at yourself as a piece of God. You have a piece of godliness within you. Look at yourself as greatness. And then when you look at yourself as greatness, godliness, you then will have the true altruistic features of God, which then can look at your neighbor and say, he's also godliness. And then you can look right past all of the layers which are but above him and show ultimately who you really are. With that, I would like to conclude and thank everybody for joining us tonight. I hope that we discovered a little bit about who we are, and hopefully we can all come out a little bit better people as we get ready to greet the receiving of the Torah on Shavuos. If you're able to get to synagogue, if you're getting out to hear the 10 Commandments, or if you're going to be celebrating from home, Chag Sameach and Shavua Tov.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Unless anyone has any questions, I will end the session, but Chag Sameach, and hopefully we'll see you in person next year.
Yes.